One thought I had was, it's interesting how in our minds we create platonic models for things,
Right.
and we get fixated on them.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we do have to deconstruct our platonic models all the time so they don't become reified.
Exactly.
In other words, so we always have to be, if we have a model for something, right? If we have some kind of model for something, we always have to say that this is not the truth. Like, this is just a model. This is not the truth. This is one model that you could use as a lens, as a map for reality, but it's not the truth. Whereas again, people think that the model is the truth, and then they become fundamentalist and dogmatic and annoying about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Two things that come to mind. First thing is, this is what I meant when I said it's the seed that's already in modernity, because we call it now deconstruction, but this is basically just the seed of it. It's the scientific method. You deconstruct what you know. You try to create better models, and so it's already embedded in modernity and the scientific method. And now it's turning against itself. Yes, that's true, but it has always done that. That's the one thing. And then you have, of course, Wilber's notion of don't confuse map and territory. And that's the thing that I have issues with when we're talking about the meaning crisis or the time between worlds, because yes, it points to something, but it's still just a model. It's a map. It's not the territory. But if we treat it as if it's the territory, then we act as if the world is like that, as if the world is in meaning crisis.
Well, can we say anything about the world then? This is what, when you're saying that, I'm like, yes, but what can we say about the world that we're in this time? Can we say that, we're going through a particular stage of zombie culture, where people are lacking, because they're lacking a sort of, they're lacking what O.G. Rose called givens. They're lacking this and so they feel lost and they don't and homeless in some sense, more than another time. So it's a question of intensity rather than a question of just like, this is the meaning crisis, that there is sort of, we are in this kind of like crunch, where all kinds of meanings are sort of dissolving, and then new meanings are not created yet, and that we're feeling like a kind of intense, this intense crunch or toxicity.
But isn't that the story that you are telling? That's my whole point.
Well, it is a story I'm telling, yeah, but I think it corresponds to something I'm seeing. I'm not saying it's the absolute truth, but it's.
What are you? No, but that's exactly what are you seeing? Are you seeing people that tell the story? But because you can't look what people are telling or doing.
You could go to facts. You could go to levels of depression and suicide among young people who look at TikTok.
Right, but they
don't have the sense of, they might have had in the past, probably if you were in Christian Europe, everybody believes in Christianity, so they don't have a meaning crisis. They might have the Black Plague or something, right? But no, but you know what I'm saying? They might have exactly. They might only live to 30, but they have something different than a meaning crisis if they all believe in Jesus and.
But again, if we take, that's my whole point. If we take postmodernism as something valuable, as something that there is, then we have to acknowledge the fact that between a fact or two facts and the story that we're telling, that's a long way to go. And there's a long way of seeing, okay, there are paradigms that kind of determine how we frame certain facts. If we look for certain facts, what are the stories that we're telling? How arbitrary are the stories that we're telling? So, and if we treat that as that, so it's like we can't, there's not necessarily 100% overlap between facts and the story that we are telling. And postmodernism urges us to be very conscious about there's a disconnect there, right?
Absolutely.
And especially if you're going into more performatist or metamodern stances, sure, I get that we have to pretend that some things are true, although we know truth has been deconstructed and the grand narratives have been deconstructed. We have to act with the world, and pretend that there is a meaning crisis, although we know our models are highly skewed, I get that, but to treat the world as such, then you're in the modernist mind frame. You haven't even begun to understand that you're telling a story.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Why are you in the modernist framework? I mean, there's the idea of Maya, the idea of illusion is pretty old.
Because the modernist mind frame treats the own conceptions of the world, their own perceptions as truth facts and like objective facts. And the whole point of postmodernity was saying, oh, no, we're talking about our stories, about our construction of the world.
But that's also the point of Advaita philosophy, which dates, before Christ.
What is?
Well, that there is no substantial reality that you can point of and saying that this is a concrete, reified truth.
I'm not saying there is no reality. I'm saying I'm trying to emulate the postmodern stance that there is a disconnect between real life facts, which are there, and the long way you have to go to create a story about those facts. And those two things are two different things. And we're always engulfed in storytelling, right? But you have to be aware that it's a story, and to tell the story that, there's a meaning crisis or that we are in a time between worlds. It's kind of true, but it's at the same time, it's not. It's a story.
Well, isn't it just true? I mean, isn't our life a story? Isn't narrative how we see the world? Like, what's the difference between... I mean, we're made of stories. We're made of narrative,
I mean, you can take Lacan.
That's how we see the world. That is truth. I mean, narrative is truth. Like this, I think this is one of, that's what Jordan Peterson always says, that we don't live in facts. We live in narrative, which is a kind of a postmodern position, which is funny why he's so anti-postmodern, whereas he's putting forward a sort of a postmodern position that it's just the narrative.
Yeah.
Or the narrative is everything.
No, I'm completely agree. We are engulfed and embedded in storytelling. That's the only way how we can make sense. But that's exactly the point. It's arbitrary to a certain degree. And we are map makers. But the map is not the territory. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And sometimes it helps to orient ourselves with descriptions like this, because there is a climate crisis, there is a meta crisis, but still it's just a story that we're telling ourselves, although the facts do seem to point to this. And so you oscillate between the fact that there is some sincerity in that, but it's also, you have to treat that with a kind of grain of salt, because it's just a story. That's all that I'm saying. And that's basically the meta-modern or performatist kind of approach, because we don't have absolute truth anymore, because meta-modernism can only exist because of postmodernism, because it's a reaction. But postmodernism says there is no truth. We can deconstruct that. There are no grand narratives anymore, because it's just narrative.
But doesn't metamodernism say there is no truth, and yet there's truth too, like, kind of thing? Like,
that's the beauty of it.
That's so.
Yeah, and our perception of the world is skewed anyhow. I mean, it's like, again, coming back to this kind of sense of, the meaning crisis, when it's like, if you look at 1914, 1918, the First World War was just over. There was a plague, the Spanish flu, that killed so many young people. There was like the world economic crisis 1 year later. And so that was, Hemingway called that the lost generation. And so all of the meaning that was there before the First World War, and that kind of delivered people a sense of meaning and purpose, that was all gone. And that was a meaning crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a meaning crisis.
what we are experiencing now is like, okay, it's like maybe we can compare that. I don't know if we can, but I mean, to pretend that that is something new, that is to me absurd, because it
No, it's not
shows
something
that
new.
it's like
Is anybody saying that that's something new? I mean, there's various meaning crises that punctuate our society.
Well, that's the sentiment.
When the
No,
society falls
meaning
apart.
crisis and blah blah blah. No, it's like human beings always have, you know, crises of some sort.
Yeah.
You know, and
Well,
I would say
maybe the question is it like what people are talking about? And I don't know, is if it's sort of, you know, there's an apocalyptic feeling to it, right? It's like, okay, you know, we destroy all the species, we poison the oceans, you know, there's a sense of like, before, it's like in World War II and World War I, you could have a world war, you know, but you can't actually destroy the planet, you know. Maybe that's somewhat different since we have hydrogen bombs, and even the pandemic was kind of it was a mini pandemic, really, but it was global. So
I mean, you talk about,
I think there is a sense right now that the meaning crisis is not local, it's global. That's a little bit different, because everybody's connected.
I'm not saying it's the same, but
World War I was not a global, you know, meaning crisis. It was a European meaning crisis. You know?
Well, by definition, it was a world war, followed by global Spanish flu crisis, followed by, at least in the West, you know, a complete...
In the West. So it wasn't global yet.
Sure. But still, we have a very Eurocentric perspective. And do you think, you know, in New Delhi, the families do care about the meaning crisis? No, they're not.
Oh, that's true. Okay, well, I guess we're conflating here meaning crisis versus global, you know, existential crisis, or existential risk. Maybe I'm conflating those two.
I'm not saying there's no... Listen, it's very complicated, because I see that there is a meta crisis. Let's say, you know, like only an idiot would deny that. But still, it's like, where, like, how do we situate our description of that? It's like, historically speaking, psychologically speaking, socially speaking, because it's like, because the way to doomsday thinking is also very, very nearby. Right, and so how do we keep our spirits up and act as our best selves, to use this, you know, kind of cliche, you know, in order to act properly in the world, and so if we repeat it as a mantra, there's a meaning crisis, or there's a time between, as if there's this. I doubt that it will elicit the best of ourselves. And if I look at, you know, into our society, it's like, no, it doesn't make the world a better place, really.
What, declaring that there's a meaning crisis?
Yeah, and you know, it's like, where does it help?
Well, if something is sick, you have to diagnose the illness and then figure out a way to get better. I don't know if it's helping. I don't know if John Vervaeke's analysis is helping.
Again, I'm not talking about John Vervaeke. I'm talking about how it's used.
He kind of coined the term, so that's why.
Yes, but I'm not talking about what he's pointing to. I'm talking always about the discourse and how the word is used now.
Right. So, okay. So I agree that this word can be co-opted in a way to just, you know, kind of intensify people's depression and their nihilistic gloom, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like as a hollow zombie word to, you know, further your own agenda. You know, it's like, but really, it's like, to understand what's going on, it's like you have to really look deep into the meaning of these kinds of ideas, you know, and just use them as face value. It's just like, it's like the same thing with postmodernism about deconstruction. Yes, it's partly true, but there's missing so much.
So what's missing?
First of all, that the map is the map and the territory is the territory. And if we say that the world is in crisis, then we're conflating these two things.
Well, the world is in crisis, obviously.
That's our description, yes.
But actually, I would say that the world is always in crisis.
Well, there you go.
So I'd say that there is a perennial aspect to the meaning crisis. It's always the case. There's always a meaning crisis. So as soon as you become interested in the spiritual path, you're connecting to, holy fuck, like, what's the purpose of my life? I'm gonna die. The world is fucked, etc. You have a meaning crisis.
Yes,
it happens in adolescence to everybody. And the deeper that is, the more the more you investigate, the more shallow the meaning crisis is, the less it matters. But so yes, there's a meaning crisis for everybody all the time in every person's life, right? Absolutely. But there's also the particular quality of the present meaning crisis, which has certain characteristics.